What's up, everybody? So we are back with another episode of The Jungle, and I have a very special guest with me. It's afternoon right now. Um, Guys, I got my mom on here today, and I have spoken with my mom. She was very hesitant about coming on because one thing I always preach is transparency, and I want to be very transparent with all of you. I caused a lot of damage in my relationship with my mother. But I also wanted to have her on because her and I we've rebuilt this relationship, and it's one of the most it's my favorite relationship that I am a part of this point in my life. I hang my hat on the fact that I've been able to rebuild this relationship and have such a great relationship with my mother. So without further ado, guys, this is my mother. We're gonna get into this is Mama Hazel. So mom, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
As you can all tell, she is thrilled to be on here doing this with me. But guys, there's a method to my madness, and like I was saying before, I caused a lot of damage in this relationship. And I'm going to have my mom speak on some of that real briefly because I know she doesn't like rehashing the past, but I want everybody to know that I'm going to be completely honest through this whole series. That's part of the reason that I wanted to have my mom on. I've reached out to several guys on asking them to come onto the show. And one of their biggest reserves is they don't feel comfortable. They don't feel comfortable they could share. They don't want people looking at them as even bigger. They don't want people judging them. And guys, I totally respect that. But I want you all to know that it's this is part of what I feel I have to do to kind of help everybody is just be honest about everything that I did. And I want everybody to know that I'm being transparent in everything that I do, that I'm being honest. I don't want there to be any sort of questionable content that I put out, like, oh well, he said, she said. Like, no, I want it all to be out in the open, because my goal in all this is to help everybody. So with that being said, I am going to start. Mom, why don't you just tell everybody real quick where you grew up, what your family life was like growing up, real briefly. Yeah, and what your childhood was like.
My childhood was very simple. I was a farm girl. We lived in the country. I was sheltered from a lot of the world, the happenings in the world. So I was very naive, didn't understand a lot when I became an adult. We didn't have a lot of open conversation in the household. Uh, but at the time, I didn't think that was necessary, or because it was just such a very simple life back then. I come from a family of six siblings. That was my world. My siblings, mom and dad. We all had friends, but our friends were second to our siblings, and that was our closeness. We didn't do much outside of the family. It was just a very low key upbringing. Didn't have a lot of money to do anything with. So we'd play games. We'd ride our bikes around the yard. We had ponies. We'd ride the ponies. Just a very, very simple life. And I was very naive of the outside world.
So, and I want to touch on this because you and I, guys, like I said, I hang my hat on this relationship. As you all know, I'm a truck driver, and my mom and I have contests every Thursday driving home to see if we can beat our times talking on the phone. And I think our longest rolling conversation is 2 hours and 20 minutes. We made it to 2 hours and 15 minutes yesterday. But one of the things that my mom and I have talked about in those long hours of conversing is my dad. And from the first episode that I made, I kind of explained my dad as an outlaw country, cowboy boot wearing, Western button down, outlaw, country kind of guy. He always bucked against authority. But he was a hardworking guy. And so I always find it interesting because I've talked to my mom about this numerous times about her and how my dad got linked up, because coming from a sheltered house like that, um, it always kind of blew my mind that my mom would go for somebody like my dad. So how did you meet dad, and how did that all transpire?
Well, we both worked for the Ohio Department of Transportation, and I was there when he was hired in. And I had a very good friend there at the Department of Transportation, Joellen, and she and your dad were talking one day, and he had bet her that he could date any girl in the department. And
That sounds very Tackett like.
she of course challenged him that he could get me to go out. Well, he did, and I don't know how, but he did. Because I found out about this several years later that it was a challenge that he had asked me out. Um, our first date, there was there was like no kissing, no real touching. It was a little awkward for me because, like I said, I led a very sheltered life, so I was a little stiff. And he did ask me out on the second date, and I don't know how that happened because he admitted to me later that he was just not sure about the connection. But he did ask me out on a second date, and he had told himself there is no way I'm going to kiss this girl. I'm going to get even with her because I did not kiss him on the first date. But long story short, we went on the third date, and it just went on from there. And I don't know. I think I like the wildness in him. He was just fun to be around, and he opened up the world to me. And yeah, so I married him.
Good old dad.
Good old dad.
So, so I do want to talk, and so just so everybody knows, my mom and dad built a really great life for themselves. My mom, she stayed home with us kids. She retired from ODOT shortly after having me, or after Deanna. It was one of the two. So she retired from ODOT, and she was a stay-at-home mom up until later in life. And then she went and she ended up working for the local hospital, Robinson Memorial, and she retired from there. My dad, he, like I've stated, he was a workaholic. Um, Great provider. And he got sick later on in life, and we're not going to get into like all the stuff in between there, but I want to touch on real quick what. So guys, I was a full-blown drug addict at that time. I had been going through the ringer, and I don't want my mom to like have to rehash all this stuff going on with my dad along with me as well, so I'm just skipping over the stuff with my dad. But I do want to ask, like, how hard was it, and how did you deal with having a son that was a drug addict myself, and dealing with dad, not to use, I'm on a lack of better terms here, but being on his deathbed? Like, how was that? How did that?
It was tough. I think I kind of put you on the back burner at that point. Your dad was my uh main concern at that point. And so I I know you were there. You and Todd stayed with us at the last few weeks and
Yeah.
to help with your dad. And but I don't remember much interaction with you at that point. It was like my total focus was on your dad.
Okay.
It was
No.
after your dad died that you kind of smacked me. Um, yeah, and I had to wake up to the fact that I've got a problem with my son.
Okay. And so just to kind of progress things a little bit, so dad ends up passing away. And for those of you, this was before the fentanyl, like the big fentanyl epidemic, but I had a very good connection on fentanyl at the time. And I spiraled. I went down real quick, real fast, real hard. And I guess my next question is, so afterwards I started burglarizing homes, and I've always wanted to ask you this question and I never have. So I feel like this is a good kind of icebreaker. There was a time when I came back down to the house on Industry and I had the trash bags in the front of the truck. I had forgot something and I'd come back out. And that was the first time that I had ever committed a burglary. And it was, so I'm in the driveway. You came back out because you and I were kind of at arm's length at that time. I don't even know if you remember this day, but I was in the red truck, the red F-150, and you had walked back out and you asked me where all of the trash bags and thing had come from in the front seat of the truck and what was in them. And I kind of just blew you off and I left. So did you have any idea, or do you even recall that date?
I don't recall that day. When I say I was very naive, I was very naive. Your sister is the one that um, opened my eyes.
Yeah.
I didn't understand drugs at all, at all. I knew you had a problem. I had no idea what you were taking, and even if I knew what you were taking, I had no idea how it worked. It was
You,
Deanna that would when I'd have a question and go to her, she would say, uh, uh, clarify it for me, open my eyes.
yeah.
No, I don't remember that day at all.
Okay. The only reason I ask is because it was the first time I had obviously ever done anything of that nature. And I very clearly remember you walking out to the truck and me just blowing you off, which I did all the time back then.
I was
I
going to
would
say you
always,
were very good at blowing me off, and I would
yeah.
just shrug my
Um,
shoulders and walk away.
but that date always stuck in my mind because it was kind of like not that you had caught me, but you had caught me. And I was always curious if you knew what was going on.
I had no idea.
I do want to laugh real quick though, kind of lighten things up a little bit. Do you remember the time that I had all the glassware in the house next door, like the bongs and the pipes and everything, and I had been in bed and you came barreling through my door at like 9 a.m., 8 a.m., sat down on my bed, and you were yelling at me to teach you how to use the bong.
I remember that.
now, obviously, you weren't interested in smoking, but it was kind of like a, hey, I caught you. And I don't think you might have taken everything, because I know we were smoking over in that house and you used to hate that we would smoke over there.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, but that just popped into my mind too. So, okay. So fast forward a little bit. We had a real rough road there after Dad passed. You did, I did, and I know I put you through the absolute ringer. Um, so real quick, talk about, and again, if you don't want to talk about it, just tell me. But the day I got arrested, not the previous charges, where, because guys, again, I was stealing from my mom. I was writing checks with her name on them. Or I was cashing checks that she had written. And
I
I got,
didn't write them, honey.
what's that?
You were stealing checks out of my checkbook, and
That
I,
yeah, that's what
yeah, and but I didn't write the checks. You did.
yeah, that's what I was saying. But and guys, again, anybody that's dealt with a opiate or any sort of addiction like that, you get in that rut and you don't care who you're hurting. You don't, it doesn't matter to you. You're literally your main priority is how you are going to get high the next day. And I think a lot of people that listen to this understand that. But so the day that, so we go through this rigmarole for a couple years, like where it's just cat and mouse. I'm getting in trouble with the law. I'm getting in trouble. Like you're throwing your hands up. You're done with me. I know you had given me a couple places to live uptown in the rental properties. And at one point, you guys finally shut everything down and just kicked me to the curb. And then
That was the
that,
hardest day of my life.
so talk,
When I
okay,
found
so
out.
talk about that real quick. What was that like for you to, because honestly, looking at addicts, that's the route that you should take. I work with a guy right now, and his kid's going through some stuff, and his wife is continually enabling him. And I've told him time and time again, you have to cut them off. I didn't wake up and I didn't come to until my family cut me completely off.
Mhm.
So what was it like to when you finally just kicked me out of the apartments and what was that
I
like
did,
for?
for quite a while, I didn't realize your drug addiction was as bad as it was. You were, I think it was probably after the second or third time you went into rehab, came out, and then got right back into the old habit, that it occurred to me that we have a major problem here. You're not going to straighten out with just going into the rehab situations. Um, I was watching a lot of Dr. Phil back then, and he kept talking about enablers, and I was denying the fact that I was enabling you because I felt I was,
I'm your kid. You were helping me.
yeah, that
As your godson.
I was just trying to help you along the path of straightening up, getting your life in order. When I finally accepted the fact that I was enabling you, that I needed to cut you out, drop, yeah, I closed the doors, and that was the hardest day of my life because I didn't know what my little boy was going to do without me.
Yeah.
And I can remember at one point, it was probably 2, 3 weeks. Uh, Various people would tell me that you were here, you were there, that, and so it was like a relief. He's still out there. He's not dead in a ditch or a field, and I'll never know whatever happened to him. It's a horrible place to be in for a mother, um, not knowing where her son is, not hearing from him, not knowing. One day I was uh, uh, clocking out at work. And one of my coworkers stopped me and she says, Hazel, what's going on? I thought I was hiding it very well at work, but I obviously wasn't. And she said, I can tell you're upset, you're stressed. She was a pastor's wife. And I broke down and cried and told her about you, about you being an addict, and that I finally kicked you out, and that I hadn't heard from you in several weeks, and I was very concerned. Hadn't heard from you or about you for several weeks, and she asked me if I wanted to pray, and we embraced and prayed, and went home, and that evening you called me, which was a blessing. It was just a blessing. But it wasn't the answer to our problem. We still had a problem. I remember asking Deanna, how's he existing out there, Deanna? How's he eating? Where's he sleeping? What's he doing? And at that point, she told me, Mom, he's robbing houses. I really didn't know up to that point that you were stealing. I mean, I knew you were taking from us, but I didn't realize you were going into other people's homes. So, and then it was just shortly after that, I think, that your face was all over the news.
So yeah, that was I talked in an earlier episode about once you cross a line, and my line was always putting a needle in my arm. That was my hard line. I'm not going to do it. I've seen what it does to people, and after you cross that initial line that you set for yourself with your morals and your values, and I was still doing all kinds of other shit, but once it's almost like once you cross that line, nothing's off the table. And I remember being out after I remember you guys had kicked me out of the cottage that Uncle Harold lives in now. And I remembered it was empty, and I was going down there and I was climbing in through the back window because there was still a bed and there was still that little heater on the wall. Everything was turned off, but that little heater still worked. And I would climb in there with no sheets and no pillow, dressed from head to toe, turn that heater on, and I would curl up on that bed and sleep at night. And that's when I was out here. I did a lot of time in Akron running around, doing felonious bullshit. But you know, it's I remember, and for as high as I was all the time, you were always, even though I didn't reach out to you, it was kind of, I was in that woe is me mentality. Like, I'm a victim. I am the, everybody's turned against me. There was no accountability for any of my actions. There was no accountability for the hurt that I put on our family. There was no accountability for anything across the board. And so, you know, the day I got caught, I remember I had been down at the cottage. I had slept in there that night, and somebody, I don't remember who it was. It might have been Tracy, came and picked me up and took me down to Globe Auto because I had asked, and I went down and fed Dave that whole spiel about, hey, I've got a job in the pipeline. I needed a car. And so Dave gave me a car, and I was off. So you, real quick, let's touch on, I get arrested I get caught. They pinned 3 burglaries on me. And that day, how did you find out about it? Like, did somebody call and say, hey, Chris is, and
Somebody had
were
called
you,
me. Somebody had called me, and I don't remember who it was, and warned me and told me you were on the news on TV. And so I turned TV on and of course saw it. And like you said, it was in the papers then, and it was just all over. But I don't really remember who called me. I do know I went into like a just a total shutdown. Never, it just never occurred to me that I expected my son to come knocking back on my door and saying, Mom, I need help. I want to get clean. I want to get my life in order. I never expected it to go that far, that you would end up. And for a very, very long time, I blamed myself for you being in jail, because I felt if I had maybe tried a different route, done something different, you wouldn't have gone to burglary and been a felon.
well, I mean, I'll tell you time and time again, there was nothing, and this is the sad truth of it, and that's why people need to understand you just cut your loved ones off when it comes to that point, because their rock bottom is not the rock bottom that you think it should be. So
Yeah.
so you kept hoping I would come back, but I still had runs left in me. I still had that get up and go, that fight, that I was still going to go out and party, and not party, but sustain my high. Um, so, and you and I have talked enough now at this point. You understand it was nothing you did. Like, you can sit here and place all the blame in the world that you want on your own shoulders, but I was a spoiled brat growing up. Um, Emotionally, like materialistically, like all of that. You guys took great care of me. There was never any communication, kind of sucked at the house, but everybody, I mean, outside of that, I think you and I have talked enough. You understand it's nothing you did. It was 100% on me. So
But for
I
a
very,
long time, parents tend to take that responsibility on their own, that it was
yeah.
maybe something they did in your upbringing. At the time things were going on, that was there another avenue? I got to tell you, Deanna reached out to Dr. Phil, and he actually got back with us, and we almost ended up on Dr. Phil. Now I'm glad we didn't. I'm just not one to go public. I'm a very private
Yeah.
person, but we were constantly looking for ways to try to help
Oh,
you.
I remember, what was that show because there was another show you guys reached out to that they got back, and they called and interviewed me. It was a documentary. It's whatever that big documentary was on A&E. And
I don't remember.
it follows drug addicts, and then they send them across country to these rehabs. And I remember the woman called me the one day and they were like, listen, we want to do a documentary about addiction. She was like, do you feel you're addicted? And in my head, I'm like, I'm a little bit smarter than you. I see this coming a mile away. And I flat out told her, I was like, no, I don't have a drug problem. Like, it gave me that vibe of what the hell was the name of that show? Deanna could tell us what it was, but it's
Yeah,
like they follow them around and they follow their daily routines and they video them and then they send them to like this luxurious rehab across country. But she's asking me these questions, and I very clearly remember, like, nope, I see this coming a mile away. Not today, Satan.
there was
Um,
also an intervention
that's what it was.
program
Intervention.
out there. Yeah, where but that one the family kind of uh, you would get the family members together and sit down with you
Well, that was a part of the show, but that's the
and
show that But I remember them calling and interviewing me, and I was like, "No, they're crazy. I don't have a drug."
yep. We looked into that. Yeah, we were constantly back then. Portage County was a terrible county to be living in for any type of help. You had to go into Summit County or bordering counties. And then because it was Portage County, you were put on a list and you were always behind, their county residents. And so we were constantly, Deanna especially, researching, trying to find some place that we felt could help you. Most of the places we couldn't afford was the biggest problem. They were just beyond our
Well, and I, I remember shit. I honestly went to probably 8 different rehabs and detoxes, and I there was two. I had 2 stints in renovation house, which were close to a year. Well, I did probably close to 2 years up in upstate New York at renovation house.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean,
And we
and
really thought that was going to be your savior,
yeah,
New
well,
York.
joke's on you.
Yeah.
Uh, so okay, so the day I get locked up, I remember I gave you a phone call. That was the first time. So the detectives, and I wanna laugh about this real quick. So you and I kind of had a laugh about it the other day. The day I got locked up, so it's about 2 days later. I think Monday, Tuesday rolls around. I know I'm not going home. And the marshals, it's Detective Springer and Detective Atkins. So Corporal Simsat comes down with his pink handcuffs right at lockdown time, and he'll grab guys out of their cells and march them off. And in Portage County Jail, it's always funny because all the guys will be at the door watching, and they'll be like, "Don't eat the cheeseburgers! Don't eat the cheeseburgers!" Because what these guys do is they'll take you out, make you tell on yourself for cheeseburgers, for McDonald's, for everything else. So Corporal Simsat comes down. He throws me in pink handcuffs, waltzes me out of the pod. Guys are kicking their doors. They're pounding. They're like, don't do it. The hamburger's not worth your life." And so I go out and they're taking me to all these different houses that had been burglarized. We were out for probably a solid like 5 hours, driving all over Portage County. And, you know, the conversation you and I had, obviously, I'm not going to put on air, but I remember calling you, and this was one of the this was one of the define I won't it's not the moment that got me clean, because the moment that got me clean was the first time I saw the kids in prison when they threw the fit after they visitation was over, and they were like, "Dad, come home," and they're kicking and screaming. But I very clearly, and I can still remember like the hurt in your voice the day that I called, that I was out with the marshals, because they let me have a phone. They let me use their cell phone. They're like, "Is there anybody you want to call?" And the only person I was calling was you. And I called you, and I remember, what was that like to hear from me after I had been? Did you want to scream at me? Did you want to? Were you just hurt? Were you upset? What?
Actually, I went into a panic because you told me you were in the cruiser and they were taking you around, showing you different properties and asking you if you had been involved in this. And my first thought was, don't tell them, don't admit it.
Yeah,
I didn't want multiple charges against you. And I think I made some I was cautious because I didn't know if I was on speakerphone in that cruiser or if I was just talking to you. But I do remember I kind of gave you a warning, be careful what you say.
yeah,
Because I went into a panic mode. when you called me and said you were in that cruiser.
Well, listen, and I'm just going to say this, and to this day, I still respect Detective Springer, Detective Atkins, Corporal Simsack, everybody that was in charge of me while I was locked up. I'd say 80% of them. Lieutenant Ashcroft at CCA, you can kiss my ass. You're a piece of shit. But sorry, guys, had some technical difficulties, but I did not lose my train of thought, surprisingly. Lieutenant Ashcroft from CCA, if you ever see this, you, sir, can kiss my ass. You're about the only CO that I despise. But all the other guys, they were all respectful. They would all tell me, you don't belong here. Like, what are you doing? But I do want to piggyback off of or go back to saying anybody that's ever in a situation, and I don't feel bad saying this because the criminal justice system is set up to completely railroad people in the United States. If you look overseas, they actually have rehabilitation programs. The UK has communities that rehabilitate and reintegrate. The United States is, along with China and Russia, in the top 3 countries for the worst the worst criminal justice systems around the globe, the highest recidivism rates, because it's basically built to just make money off of you. So anytime that the police come and drag you out, I very clearly remember being in that minivan. It was a gold Dodge minivan, like the one we had growing up, the Dodge Caravan. And I remember they were taking me to multiple properties, and all day long, I just ate my cheeseburgers, sipped on my Coca-Cola, smoked a few cigarettes, called my mama, and I was like, I was super high. I don't remember that. I can't say yes, I can't say no. And guys, I just, anytime you're in that situation, I know law enforcement isn't going to like me saying this, but you don't cooperate. You're already going to get railroaded. Um, don't make it worse for yourself. Go eat your cheeseburgers, play the game, and do your thing. But that being said, okay, so I make the phone call with you that day, and then it's a long road down. It's a long road. It's 2 years after that point of you coordinating visits, you trying to get the kids up, phone calls, so on and so forth. So I would have to say, and I want you to touch on, I would assume it was almost relieving knowing I was somewhat in a contained, safe environment at that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I knew you were getting meals a day and that, yes, you were not out on the streets. Absolutely.
Okay. What was it like the first visit that we had? Because I know you came up. I do remember you would not bring the kids up to county because you did not want the through the glass visits.
Right.
And I remember you and I agreed on that, and I agreed 100%. I was like, that could be traumatizing. Once I get down to prison, they could come. So what was it like to see your son like behind glass?
Well, it's not an experience any mother wants to go through. Um, uh, it was comforting is not the right word, but it was comforting to the point that you looked good. You looked healthy, healthier than you had looked in a long time because you were clean at that point. But I found myself looking at all the other inmates as they were coming and sitting down, and then my son, and I'm thinking, this guy looks scary. This guy, ooh, is he going to hurt my son? Or I just worry constantly about you, and you were so big that you did take care of yourself, but as a mother, you always worry.
Yeah.
But the visit itself was it was okay. I was you're never quite sure what to say over those phones because they're recording everything. And I know so I was very cautious. It was a little it was awkward, a little awkward because you just don't know what to say or what to
Or what's being monitored. And yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
signs everywhere that say they say everything's being recorded, everything's
yeah,
being and they do sit and listen. I know lots of guys who have caught charges over saying the wrong thing over phones and setting up drugs to be brought in. And I was friends with a guy down in prison that his mom got caught. They said too much over the phone, and she was bringing tobacco and weed, and they got caught. State
Mhm.
Highway Patrol pulled her over when she got up to Conneaut. So yeah, it is. It's definitely a experience that no mother, no mother should have to
No,
or
no.
or kids for that matter. And I very clearly, like I said, I remember the my defining moment where I was like, "Fuck this!" It had been I was probably in 6 months at that point, 7 months, and to me, it was still kind of shock factor. Everything was kind of not exciting, but it was. I don't know what the word that I would use is. It was new, and it was not that it was anything I ever wanted to go through, but those first 6 or so months, I started working out and I started getting my mind right, my body right, but I never had really made the I'd never drawn the line in the sand at that point that this is it, until it was the first visitation. You brought the kids up, and again, I've talked about this in my very first episode with Brian, and it was the we're in visitation, and I could finally touch and hug the kids, and they were sitting on my lap, and Des had already kind of walked away from the kids. She had dropped them on Deanna's doorstep. I knew the kids had nobody as far as a parental unit except for you and Deanna, and you and Deanna stepped up. You stepped up big time. Um, and you took care of the kids while we were out. And still to this day, I look at other kids, talking to Danielle on the other episodes, and some of these kids that have seen the darker side of the shit that like their parents did, like I did, where they should have turned out messed up. And they did, and my kids didn't. And I attribute a lot of that to you and Deanna. I attribute it to the fact that I drew that line after, we were in visitation, and they called visitation, and it's you can get one hug in, and those kids lost it, and it was kicking, screaming. Chris got to the point where Chris wouldn't even come up and visit me anymore. um and finally being sober and finally seeing the damage that you've caused, that was my defining moment. That was when I was like, this is it. This is fucking stupid. And you're right. I'm looking at all these guys in visitation, and the whole time that I'm locked up, from county to Lorraine's reception to prison, through all of it, all these COs are coming up to me, and I'm having like conversations with them, and I'm talking to them, and they're like, "What the f are you doing here?" They're like, "You're too smart for this. Like, what are you doing with your life?"
Mhm.
And so that was 100% the defining moment. When you're sober and you're down the road, and you've got some clean time under your belt, and you're finally like having to deal being sober with your own emotions, your thoughts, and seeing all the damage you've caused. That was it for me. So um okay, so fast forward a little bit down the road. We're starting to round out on time that you have to leave, so I do want to get to. So I come home. They sent me to that neo cap, and I was down there for 3 months after prison, which was stupid. I don't For Lori Pittman knowing dad, she really stroked me on that one. But so I go to neo cap. I'm there for 3 months, and then I come home, and you let me move into your house. So what was going through your mind when I came home? What was it like to finally? I mean, I'm sure you were happy I was back, but I'm sure there
Very
was.
happy you were back. It was strained though, because we hadn't for a very, very long time had a good relationship. I didn't feel we couldn't talk like we talk today. We just
Yeah.
avoided avoided each other. Um, I was happy to open my doors and let you in, but I was also very cautious, very apprehensive that are we going to start down the wrong path from here? Uh, I was scared.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go through it again. Um, I I have to tell you at this point that the day I heard that you were arrested, that they had caught you, um, I spiraled. I I hit rock bottom, and for months. I couldn't bring myself to leave the house because I didn't want to face people. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. Um, it got so low that I was thinking of ways to just end it. I didn't want to deal with this life anymore. And if it hadn't been for your sister stepping up, and she pulled me through, she is the one that got me through this turmoil with you, Chris. Um, she was always there when she saw me starting to fall, and she picked me up. Um, she was my confidant. She kept me going. I leaned on her. She was the strong party through this ordeal. I was not. I give her full credit on that. When it comes to your kids, I give your sister full credit for it. I was there to help her in any way I could. She put her life on hold to take care of these kids. And I agree with you. I think you've got two phenomenal kids. And I know they love you to death. Uh, you have really stepped up as a dad. Um, but it was a rough time of my life. I didn't even want to be around my own siblings, my own family, and I was very, very close to them.
Yeah.
Um, you just lose all. I lost all respect for even myself. I was I was in a very, very bad place for quite a while there. And thank God
Well,
I thank God I had a daughter, your sister, that pulled me through. Yeah, because I really don't think if I'd have been out there by myself that I'd be here today talking to you.
well, to be honest with you, I'm glad you brought that up because people need to understand, addicts go through their whole addiction and their runs with such a mentality of they are the center of the universe. And I think people in general do that.
Mhm.
People, it's human nature that you are the center of your own universe. So you don't look at the damage that you're causing in other people's lives, whether it's actually malicious or whether it's I'm a drug addict and I don't understand, or whether it's just people, you know what I mean? You don't understand the damage you're causing in other people's lives. So at this
Yeah.
point, and that's honestly the first time you've ever said that to me. But people need to, if there's anybody out there struggling with addiction, that could be part of your rock bottom that helps you build yourself out of that hole, is realizing you are causing this type of damage in other people's lives. You're causing turmoil, you're causing chaos, you're making other people spiral. Because I mean, with the kids, yeah, it was obviously you and Deanna as well, but with the kids, it was I knew if I didn't get my shit together, I was going to have to live with that burden the rest of my life. I was going to have to carry that I let those kids down, that I fucked up my entire life, that you know what I mean? And I didn't want to do that to the kids. I didn't want to do it to you. And then finally being sober and realizing it, that's what I kind of based my foundation on. Now, I also want to go back to what you said about when I moved in with you. You're right. We were strained. Our relationship was nothing like what it is today.
No.
But I want to touch on that real quick because people need to understand what I did when I came home. I just went through the motions. You fake it till you make it. And I had guys calling me. I had guys stopping by the house, guys messaging me online like, "Hey, you're back. Let's link up. Let's." And I'm like, no, no, no. And I was always respectful. I was always like, "Hey, I don't respect what you're doing, but I understand. I get why you were where you're at. If I see you at the gas station, if I see you in the street, I will give you a hug, tell you I love you, wish you the best of luck, be on your way. But I'm not going back through this with my kids." But what I did when I came home, and this is why I'm so big on setting goals and building a foundation, because even though our relationship was strained, I made it a point that I was going to get a job, which I did. I never called off. I went to the gym once, twice a day. I made sure I was down to pick up the kids every day from school, unless I was working. There were days I couldn't get down because I was working. Um, I made sure that I was doing the next best thing as far as as far as what I knew to do at that point, because I was still broken. I was still, there was no, there was no rehabilitation while you're in prison. It's, you go to prison in the United States and you're thrown in a box and you're forgotten about until you get out. And then they want to see progress. And if you don't have coping mechanisms and you don't have things to kind of build yourself up off of and work yourself through like holes and situations, you're going to get frustrated, you're going to get fed up, and you're going to go right back to your old ways. So you fake it. There's an AA saying, and as much as I am not against AA, but I kind of do things my own way, and I have from the start, it's you fake it till you make it. You pretend like you're doing you pretend like you are the most sober, upstanding citizen in the world until you actually start being that person. And that's what worked for me. I stayed consistent. I kept my routines, and I started. So I know it's 2 o'clock, but I want to focus on rebuilding relationships too, because our relationship was strained when I came home. And like I said, I hang my hat on knowing that your and my relationship was so strained, and to the point that our relationship is now, like we have an amazing relationship.
And I agree.
I
I never thought we'd get to this point again.
I didn't either. And so to and see, I'm gonna end up fucking crying on here again too. Um, but what was it? Well, where or what was it like when you started to see that things were improving? Like what at what point did you start seeing like hey, he's really doing it? And what were your thoughts? What were
Well, when I saw that you were finally, when you got a job and kept the job, you went through several jobs while you were addicted, and you couldn't keep them.
yeah,
Um, I could see that you were turning your life around, and I think it was at that point that I started uh, relaxing a little bit. Because when you first came home, like I said, it was strained, and I was still watching for those, constantly watching you, watching for those slips, those,
yeah,
I was still uh, hiding my money from you, although you were very clever on finding when you were addicted. Um, I was still very, very cautious for a long time. But when I did see that you were trying to put your best foot forward, and you were trying to improve your life and move forward, and I think we finally got to a point that we did discuss, that you did want to. It was tough out there, but you did want to stay on the right path. And I think the most reassuring thing to me was when you kept saying, "There's no way I'm ever going to go back to prison. I don't want to be back there."
yeah.
It gave me uh, encouragement that my son will make it yet. And you did. You've made a remarkable comeback. But I gotta say, it's you that did it. You made up your mind and your determination, and um, you've become the
Well,
man you are today, which is phenomenal.
I appreciate that, but I also want to put into perspective to everybody as well. I made this statement, you fake it till you make it, but I know these timelines are coming at everybody kind of fast. This is 10 years in the making. And I think you're in my relationship. While it got good 5, 6 years in, and while we were continuously building, for us to get to this point, this took roughly 8 years. I mean, I've been home 10 years. I started driving semi, and then I made sure I called you every single day, whether it's 5 minutes or whether it's 2 hours and 20 minutes on the phone. I make sure that I call my mom every day and check in on you. And that's,
That makes me feel good as a mom.
well, and people, I will tell you, one of the things that keeps me going and keeps me on the up and up is rebuilding relationships. And you don't just rebuild them and then you're like, oh well, we're good, and you walk away. You have to maintain good relationships in your life. And I've got a handful of people. I've got the guys in the group chat like Tyler, Yonk, Nick. I've got you. I've got Deanna. I have my wife. I have a couple other real good guys that I can reach out to on a regular basis. I got guys in the trucking industry. You build relationships and you always just push to do the next best thing and be a better person. And people will see that. And that's almost like a driving factor and a driving force in me right now. Like, um, if something needs done that nobody else is going to do, you do it, and you reach out to people and you offer to help people and you say hi, good morning to people at the gas station, and you it's
Mhm.
little thing. You hold the door open for people. You make society better, and that's what's going to make you a better person in the long run. So, um, okay. So I've been home and so rebuilding our relationships, because I do still kind of want to talk about this a little bit, where we are at
You were
today.
the main force on rebuilding the relationship because I didn't, you made it hard for me to talk to you for a long time.
Yeah.
You bucked me on anything I said or would disagree, or you just had this chip on your shoulder, and um, you you would belittle me. I don't need you, mom. I don't need you. So it was hard for me to approach you and to build the relationship. It was you that I think needs the credit for that. You finally started talking to me, and we
Yeah.
started.
But you also, I talk to a lot of guys too, where on the other side of it, and this is for anybody on the other side of it, um, us rebuilding this relationship has done wonders for you and your mental health and your
Oh,
well-being and
absolutely.
so forth as well. So being on the other side of it, people need to understand, if somebody is willing to extend that hand and make
Mhm.
amends and make things right, or try to reestablish a relationship or rebuild one, there, I personally don't feel there's ever too much damage that's been done, because I did a ton of damage to your and my relationship. And yes, there was baby steps to get back, but you keep making the baby steps. You keep putting your next foot forward, and you just keep trying. And eventually those people will come around. And I know there's situations where some people just don't want to rebuild that relationship. And you let it go.
Yeah.
But if there is any hope on the other end of being able to rebuild that relationship, that's that's potentially going to be a driving force in keeping somebody moving forward. And it's
Well, and
also,
I think that's why we got our relationship built, because you would take those baby steps where I was cautious
yeah,
and didn't feel comfortable. You took those baby steps, and I kept the door open.
yeah.
So
And and
I was
again,
willing to receive those.
guys, it's been 10 years of
Oh
doing
yeah.
this. This did not happen overnight. It didn't happen in a month, a year, 5 years. It gradually happened,
Mhm.
but this relationship has been a 10-year work in progress. So okay. Uh is there anything else that you want to talk about as far as rebuilding relationships?
I'm glad we did. Um, um, I'm awful glad that it worked for us. I wish everybody could have the relationship with their son that I have with my son. It's awesome. At this point in my life, I'm a lucky mom. Um, no, I like I said, I do have to give you a lot of credit on that though, because I didn't feel comfortable in pushing. I didn't. Again, it was my uh, quiet country upbringing. I didn't know how to.
Well, but I mean, I got to give you credit as well, because you didn't have to open back up. You didn't have to. We could have very easily become the statistic of people that just don't make amends.
Correct.
You had every right to not open your doors back up to me. You had every right to not answer your phone when I called. I was a scumbag. I was 100% a scumbag. But there's also accountability in there. You have to recognize your issues and then you build from them. But I think you sell yourself short in your role in all this as well, because it takes two people to have a relationship, and you're the other 50%.
Oh, I have to say probably the strongest thing you had going in your favor was I never stopped loving you. You were always, uh, I tell everybody he was my Mother's Day gift. I wanted a child for many years, and I had you on Mother's Day. You were my Mother's Day gift, and it was just my love for you that I was always going to be there for you. I think even if we had an strained relationship at this point, you would still have my love. I would be leaving you alone
Yeah.
because but it was just the strong mother love that and kept me in there.
Well, I love you.
You're my boy.
You're, you're my mom. All right, we're hitting about 2:15 at this point. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we?
No, not we'll get mushy.
I think we a couple of times, but all right, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this, guys. Not guys, mom. I love you,
Love
uh,
you.
and I'm gonna get mushy now. Um, like I said, this has been. I hang my hat on our relationship now, because I feel like if I can rebuild the amount of damage that I caused, if I can rebuild this relationship, there's not a whole lot that I can't do. There's not a whole lot of people I can't win over. There's not a whole lot of people I can't learn to love. And you, like I said, I think you sell yourself short a lot of times on you are in the role that you played in this as well. Like I said, it's 50-50, and you had no you had every right to not let me back into your life.
Mhm.
But you did, and I literally I love talking to you all day on the phone while I'm out on the road. I love being able to hang out with you. Mary laughs at me constantly when I get to come and see you, because I get giddy like a kid on Christmas. Because I mean, you live, for everybody that knows, I moved 45 minutes away from my mom because I didn't want to be in that area. Like we bought a house 45 minutes south. So I don't get to get out there all the time and see you. So when I do, it's like a gift in itself. I love coming out to see you. I love our success story. I
I do
have a
too.
success story, but if you were to put me and you beside each other and show our entire, from the pits of hell to where we are now, it's a great story.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't think without you and Deanna, there's a few people that I attribute where I am today to in full, and it's myself obviously, but it's you, it's Deanna, it's my wife. Um, I don't know if I would be where I was today. Yes, I'm the one that put my foot forward, but it's great to have such a good support system behind me.
Yeah.
Um,
But you've
so
got to give yourself a lot of credit too, because it's you that had to do this.
yeah,
You you had to make the moves. You had to do what you needed to do to finally start and get ahead. We were just there to kind of hold you up and nudge.
yeah. No,
So
and yeah, I mean, in the beginning, for years, when I first came home, it was me. It was me against everybody.
yeah.
Not in like an angry fighting literal sense.
Mhm.
It was me. I had to do it. It's all these relationships, like the one with my wife and the one with you and the kids especially. At this point, I have such a great relationship with my kids, that those are all things that come after you build yourself out of that hole.
Right, right.
Uh, and and like I was talking to Tyler and Jeremy about, you build these, you start down here, and then you build this step, and you build this step, and you build this step, and you might stumble building the next step and come back down, But then you have to look at all these other steps behind it that you've built, and you can hang your hat on those, and that should be something to motivate you. And it should be, you just have to build a foundation. And
Mhm.
I just, that's what's kept me where I am today, is having something to look back on. And I just, I love you. You're an amazing mom. You always
Thank
have
you.
been.
Thank
I
you.
know I did not give you the credit you deserved for years, but at this point, like I said, we have a great story.
Mhm.
Um, our history maybe wasn't that great, but I think that's what makes our comeback story amazing. So
We definitely had a roller coaster ride throughout our life, but
we did.
we're at the top now, and we ain't going down.
Well, we, everything that goes up's got to come down, but but we're not for hopefully not on anything detrimental. But all right. Well, I love you. I'm going to stop recording. And guys, to anybody that has been on the website, I've wanted to start doing this. My son, he developed my website, so I want to start giving a shout out to him on every episode to kind of promote his little thing he's got going. It's webmaven.com. If you guys are interested in a website, he's putting up a plugs page on my website, webuildmonsters.org. You guys will be able to go on there if you need web design done. He does it cheap. He does hosting. He does all of it throughout the ranks. So check him out. And I think that was it. If you need trees cut down, call my boy Tyler. And yeah, that's about it. So I love you guys. Till I see you again. It's Silverback Tech and Mama Hazel. Love
Love you, boy.
love you, Mama. Over and out.